Good evening. Welcome to News Plus here on Loveworld USA. I'm TGK Andre. Let's take a quick look at the top headline stories this evening. Iran and US hold first nuclear negotiation since President Trump's return. President Trump exempts electronics from tariffs amid global negotiation push. Doge report blames Democrat-run states for majority of $400 million in unemployment fraud. Judge rules Colombia protest leader Mahmoud Khalil can be deported. The United States and Iran held their first direct nuclear negotiations since President Donald Trump returned to office, marking a significant moment in U.S.-Iran diplomacy. The meeting took place in Muscat, Oman, where U.S. Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi reportedly exchanged brief face-to-face remarks, a historic first since the Obama-era nuclear discussions. Iranian state media emphasized the encounter, indicating that the initial round of talks went well, with the follow-up session set for April 19th. The stakes are high, as Tehran's uranium enrichment program nears weapons-grade levels, and President Trump continues to warn that military action remains on the table if no deal is struck. While the U.S. is pressing for a dismantlement of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, Iran insists it will not abandon its program outright, a stance hardened by years of mistrust and past examples like Libya. Witkoff has stated unequivocally that any agreement must prevent Iran from reaching weaponization capability. During the 2-hour Saturday meeting, both sides exchanged 4 rounds of messages through Omani mediators before Araghchi and Witkoff's brief conversation. Iranian officials described the dialogue as constructive, while also cautioning against lengthy negotiations. Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi praised the atmosphere and said efforts would continue towards a binding agreement that enhances regional peace. Despite cautious optimism, deep divisions remain. Iran seeks sanctions relief and acceptance of uranium enrichment up to 20%, while the U.S. demands strict caps on enrichment and transparency. With hardliners on both sides watching closely and regional powers like Israel expressing skepticism, the next round of talks will be critical in determining whether the decades-old nuclear standoff can finally yield a lasting resolution. Watch this.
Now, Iran has said that the talks with the United States representatives were constructive. The negotiations went on for at least 2 hours in Oman, and Iran's foreign ministry has said that it will continue with the talks with the United States next week. The foreign ministry has said that Iran and the US negotiators spoke directly for a few minutes. While the West maintained that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, Iran says that its facilities are meant only for peaceful purposes, such as research and for generation of electricity. But recently, Khamenei's advisors have said that if the West continues to pressurize and threaten Iran and stage attacks on its nuclear resources, then Iran will have no option but to resort to go nuclear.
As we've discussed here on Loveworld USA time and time again, especially in the recent weeks, the primary purpose of the United States push to ensure that Iran doesn't reach weapons-grade enrichment of the uranium is primarily for peace in the region, the same way that Oman's foreign minister stated, that's why these talks are good. Again, Iran has stated time and time and again that, that they're using their nuclear enrichment, their uranium enrichment for energy, for medical purposes, and things of the sorts. But many countries in the region have expressed skepticism, including the United States. And because Iran has a history, which is why, even just a small talk like this, where, of course, we stated that it wasn't a lengthy negotiation, but even any kind of negotiation it's momentous, because with Iran, things like that don't come about too often. But this shows you how important it is that since the Obama era, which is, decades ago now, at least 10 to 15 years ago, we haven't had peace talks like this or, weapons talks like this with Iran since that time. So it's good to see that the Trump administration, through Steve Witkoff, And Iran and their team are getting together to try and find a peaceful resolution to all of this, because the last thing that the world needs to happen is for volatility, especially where nuclear weaponry is involved. The Trump administration has officially exempted smartphones, laptops, and other consumer electronics from the sweeping tariff increases introduced earlier this month. In updated guidance issued late Friday by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the administration clarified that electrical goods, including computer processors, hard drives, and semiconductors, will not be subject to the 125% China-specific tariffs or the 10% baseline global tariffs imposed on select countries. The move, which follows a presidential memorandum signed Friday, is intended to ease pressure on American consumers and key tech companies like Apple, Samsung, and Dell. The exemptions apply retroactively to goods that departed warehouses as of April 5th, providing relief to an industry heavily reliant on Chinese supply chains. China accounts for nearly a quarter of all electronics imported into the U.S., making the exemption especially significant for consumer markets. While the administration has doubled down on its tariffs targeting China, it has simultaneously implemented a 90-day pause on customized reciprocal tariffs for other nations. This dual-track approach reflects President Trump's broader strategy to pressure global trading partners into renegotiating agreements. Administration officials say Trump's goal is to secure 90 favorable bilateral trade deals within the 90-day window, signaling a shift from global confrontation to targeted diplomacy. The decision to shield electronics also highlights the practical limits of reshoring tech manufacturing. Industry experts have long noted that producing smartphones, semiconductors, and other components domestically will take years and require massive capital investment. By carving out these products from tariffs, the administration appears to be balancing its nationalist economic agenda with market realities and supply chain interdependence. Let's take a look.
Exclusions were published late on Friday by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The exclusions will apply to smartphones, laptops, computers, hard drives, and computer processors and memory chips. In effect, these products are excluded from Trump's 145% China tariffs and his baseline 10% global tariffs on nearly all other nations. Now, these popular and essential consumer electronic items are not generally made in the United States, and setting up domestic manufacturing for these products will take many years. The decision will benefit some of the electronics giants, including the likes of Apple, Samsung, etc. Now, Trump's new tariffs will also not affect machines used to make semiconductors, and this is important for the chip makers like the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturers that has announced major new investments in the United States. The current exclusion is a sign that the products may soon be subject to a different tariff, expectedly a lower one for China.
This goes to echo what we've said here on Loveworld USA News time and time again, especially on News Plus, that the aim of the tariffs, of course, is to shake up the global trade imbalance. But more importantly, it wasn't just to kick the hornet's nest and run away. It was to bring the countries back to the negotiating table. Because the United States had footed the bill time and time again for decades, being on the wrong end, the weighted end of the scales of global trade. And now, all of these countries had run around freely with the idea that, the apple cart has been set. Nobody's going to upset it. And pretty much the Trump administration in his second term said, all right, is that what you think? We're actually going to show you how we can do this. And they did it. And the markets reacted. We looked at the Japanese market. It flew down 6% in its opening hours, to the point where multiple stock markets across the world, they executed what we call circuit breakers. And what a circuit breaker is in the stock market means that all trading is halted, suspended. So once they hit it, it doesn't matter if a trade was in the middle of executing. That trade is on pause, because it means that the market is losing too much money, that if it keeps on going, it's just going to keep on downturning. And we saw this happen when those tariffs went into effect. And that woke up a lot of countries for them to understand that, never has something like this been done before on purpose, but President Trump and his administration actually mean what they say. And they're willing to upset the global apple cart, as long as it means that they can do right by their country and, the economics of the United States of America. Now, with China, on the other hand, it's a situation where China is one of the countries that's refusing to back down. Of course, the United States doesn't want to impose 150% tariffs on China. As much revenue as that would bring in, that would hurt the consumers and the manufacturers, especially the electronic manufacturers in the United States. So that's Apple, that's Dell, that's Samsung. I mean, most electronics, you name it. China has the supply chain for that pretty much wrapped up. And then when you even take Taiwan into effect, which produces the majority of the world's semiconductors, if China for some reason, well, not necessarily, let's not say for some reason, if China decides, as they've been hinting, to blockade Taiwan, and all of a sudden those semiconductors can't get out, it means that the global electronics race, whether that comes to GPUs for all of these different AI tools like LLMs and GPTs, whether that comes to cars and phones, like what we saw during the COVID-19 fiasco, where car prices were jacked and different prices were jacked because the world didn't have enough semiconductors, because Taiwan, that was hit heavily by COVID-19, was one of the biggest producers, is the biggest producer of semiconductors in the world. If China stops the flow of semiconductors going out into the world, then we reach a different crisis. So the United States wants to bring China to the table, and China's playing hardball. And right now, in a baseball term, it's like watching the World Baseball Classic and seeing in the ninth inning, Shohei Ohtani going up against Mike Trout. Two countries that have worked closely together to manufacture and push electronics to the world are now facing off in what is set to be the heaviest and the most important economic discussions in decades. A new report by the Department of Government Efficiency has revealed that nearly $400 million in fraudulent unemployment benefits were dispersed across the U.S. since 2020, with California, New York, and Massachusetts accounting for the vast majority, over $305 million. All three states are run under Democratic trifectas, meaning the party controls both legislative chambers and the governorship, as well as key executive offices. California alone was responsible for 68% of benefits paid under the Biden administration to parolees later identified by federal authorities as having criminal records or appearing on the government's terrorist watch list. The DOGE report also highlights a broader pattern of mismanagement, echoing previous findings that showed unemployment claims were granted to people listed as being over 115 years old, under age 5, or even born in the future. White House spokesperson Harrison Fields criticized the economic leadership in Democrat-run states, pointing to a mass exodus from high-tax regions with poor fiscal oversight. He argued that the DOGE findings reinforce public support for the Trump administration's cost-cutting initiatives, which are projected to save more than $150 billion in fraud-related expenditures by fiscal year 2026. In addition to unemployment fraud, DOGE flagged lapses in immigration screening under the Biden administration, reporting that over 6,000 individuals with criminal records were flagged by the FBI, and they were allowed to enter the country with minimal vetting, hundreds of whom received federal benefits such as food stamps, student aid, and unemployment assistance. The Trump administration has since ended parole for any individual appearing on a watch list or holding a criminal record, part of its broader efforts to reform federal benefit eligibility and national security protocols. And again, there have been many detractors to DOGE and their agenda, but we see that time and time again, their main goal is getting money out of the hands of the government and back into the hands of the people. They say, it's a colloquial saying that, there's only two things that are certain in life, although we know that it's not true, but they say the only two things are certain in life: death and taxes. And it seems like time and time and time again, the United States government has been doing their best to try and take more money out of the hands of the people and put it into the hands of the government. I mean, we know as President Trump, imposed his tariffs, that there was a time in the United States where they were thriving. Of course, this was in the early 1900s. That was the first time that they actually imposed an income tax, which was actually only supposed to affect a very, very small percentage of the American population. And even at that time, it wasn't supposed to be so much money coming out of your pockets into the hands of the United States government. But of course, if you give them an inch, they will take a mile, and a mile they took. And one of the ways that they promoted income tax is that it was only going to affect about 8% of the population at the time. Now we know that it didn't remain that way. And now everybody is being taxed, if you're making over a certain amount of money. And even if you're making under a certain amount of money, of course, you have sales tax, there's property tax, meaning that even if you buy a house and you bought the house for $5,000 in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s, you paid off the value of the house at that time. So now you think you're in the clear, right? No, because the government can still come and take property tax, which doesn't remain the same. Property taxes increase over the years. So a house that was paid off 30, 40 years ago at $5,000, even accounting for inflation, that's maybe worth $120,000, $180,000 or something around that figure, can still be paying property taxes of $8,000 a year, which can then increase year on year on year. So it's almost like you're renting your property from the government instead of actually owning it. So it's good to see Doge owning up to that and doing their best to help get money out of the governments, out of the state governments, and especially out of the people who didn't deserve it in the first place. So all of those benefits that people actually didn't qualify for, and putting it back into the hands of the American taxpayers. Good on them. An immigration judge in Louisiana has ruled that Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil can be deported from the United States due to his role in leading pro-Palestinian protests on campus and alleged misrepresentations on his immigration documents. Judge Jamie Comins determined Friday that the U.S. government had met its burden of proof to remove Khalil, citing fraudulent statements in his green card application and ties to organizations not disclosed during his residency process. Khalil's team, his legal team, has until April 23rd to submit applications for relief from removal. During the hearing, Department of Homeland Security attorneys accused Khalil of failing to disclose his past work with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, his employment at the Syrian office of the British Embassy in Beirut, and his involvement with Columbia University apartheid divest. Federal officials also alleged Khalil was inadmissible at the time of his adjustment of status due to fraud or willful misrepresentation. The Department of Homeland Security has defended the ruling, with DHS Secretary Kristi Noem stating Khalil had glorified terrorists and harassed Jewish students, asserting that the privilege of living in the U.S. should be revoked under such circumstances. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also supported the deportation under a provision of the Immigration and Nationality Act that allows removal of individuals deemed a threat to U.S. foreign policy interests. Let's take a look.
A U.S. immigration judge on Friday ruled that President Donald Trump's administration can proceed with its deportation case against Mahmoud Khalil, a graduate student at Columbia University. Khalil, who was arrested in New York City last month and transferred to a Louisiana jail, has been a prominent figure in the pro-Palestinian student protest movement that has roiled Columbia's campus. A message was read on behalf of Khalil's support team following the hearing.
Despite the government's failure to prove that Mahmoud broke any law, the court has decided that lawful permanent residents can have their status revoked for pro-Palestine advocacy. This is a blatant violation of the First Amendment and a dangerous precedent for anyone who believes in free speech and political expression.
Last month, Secretary of State Marco Rubio determined that Khalil should be removed because his presence in the United States has, quote, potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences, citing a 1952 law called the Immigration and Nationality Act, which the Louisiana judge said she lacked the authority to overrule. Khalil's case is a high-profile test of the Republican president's efforts to deport foreign pro-Palestinian students who are in the United States legally, and like Khalil, have not been charged with any crime. But the judge's decision Friday is not the final say over whether Khalil will be deported. In a separate case in New Jersey federal court, The judge has blocked deportation while he considers Khalil's claim that his arrest was made in violation of the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment protections for freedom of speech.
We will take a break, and when we return, we'll take a look at some of the stories that made headlines this week. Don't go anywhere.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, American history. It's our Declaration of Economic Independence. My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. We are finally putting America first. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. More production at home will mean stronger competition at lower prices. From this day on, we're not going to let anyone tell us that American workers and families cannot have the future that they deserve. We're going to produce the cars and ships, chips, airplanes, minerals, and medicines that we need right here in America. We're going to build our future with American hands, with American heart. This will be indeed the golden age of America.
Welcome back. Klaus Schwab, the architect of the World Economic Forum and a long-standing advocate for global governance and corporate influence, has announced his gradual departure from the role of chair of the Board of Trustees. After more than 5 decades shaping the forum's agenda and its elite Davos gatherings, Schwab stated in a letter to trustees that the organization must now recover its sense of mission. His statement comes at a time when trust in global institutions, especially those seen as disconnected from everyday realities, has waned significantly. The announcement follows mounting scrutiny of the WEF's internal culture and broader role in global affairs. A 2023 Wall Street Journal investigation exposed claims of workplace discrimination and harassment involving Schwab and other leaders. Although a legal review cleared the forum of formal wrongdoing, it confirmed that leadership and management practices fell short of expected standards. In response, the WEF announced it would revise its internal code of conduct, though critics argued these reforms are long overdue and superficial. Schwab, who turns 88 this year, has long been a controversial figure, viewed by supporters as a visionary and by critics as a symbol of elitist overreach. The WEF's stated mission of improving the state of the world is often juxtaposed with exclusive gatherings of political and business elites, where many feel real accountability and transparency are lacking. Schwab now plans to dedicate time to writing his memoirs, leaving behind a complex legacy that continues to divide public opinion. As geopolitical and economic uncertainty grows, the forum finds itself at a crossroads. The rise of nationalist and populist movements, increasing criticism of globalism, and recent actions such as new U.S. trade tariffs under Donald Trump's renewed presidency have all challenged the WEF's influence. Whether a change in leadership will lead to real reform or simply a rebranding of the same ideology remains to be seen. Now, when it comes to Klaus Schwab, if you're familiar with Pastor Chris's teachings, especially his Loveworld USA teachings at all, you know that there's a lot of data on this man. One of his famous, or should I say infamous quotes, is the famous, "You will own nothing and you will be happy," quote. And this is the mind of somebody who leads a group whose goal is to make the world a better place. In what way is the world a better place when people will own nothing and be happy? Of course, another thing that followed up from that quote was the introduction of smart cities, and of course the vaccine passports. And when you look at his track record, the track record of Klaus Schwab, you see almost a real life caricature of a movie villain from the 80s or 90s in an action movie where you have, people trying to change the world. And of course, in the public light, they're revered, they're loved, but behind the scenes, they're up to no good. I mean, we see what happened in Hawaii. We see what happened in California after the wildfires and after the destruction, where contractors were trying to bid for contracts to rebuild the damage. And they were told no because special contractors were being brought in by the governments that were going to create smart cities, those 15-minute walkable cities, which we know as by the teachings of the man of God that it's not for the benefit of those people. It's a way that the governments can then create an open air cage for those people to live in. There's no need to leave. And eventually it's like lowering a frog into hot water. They say that, if you throw a frog into boiling water, it'll jump out. It'll react, it'll jump out of the pot. But if you put a frog in water and you raise the temperature gradually, the frog's body regulates itself to adjust to the rising temperatures until it's too hot that then the frog's body, due to all of the adjustments, can't even react to jump out at all. And at that point, it's cooked, pun intended. So that's one of the ideas of these smart cities. So, of course, it's good to see that Klaus Schwab is trying to step down from power, but it does remain to be seen, because he doesn't seem like a man who gives up without a fight, what him and the rest of the WEF cabal have in store for the rest of the world. But rest assured, until they that letteth be removed, they will not have their way. The Supreme Court has ruled in favor of the Trump administration, allowing it to temporarily cancel up to $65 million in federal education grants connected to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The 5-4 decision issued Friday halts a district court's order that required the Department of Education to reinstate the grants. The justices supporting the stay noted that the organizations involved had indicated they could continue their programs without immediate funding, and that any wrongfully withheld funding could be recovered later through legal action. Chief Justice John Roberts sided with the court's liberal wing in a dissenting opinion, with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson sharply criticizing the majority. The legal battle centers on whether the Department of Education violated proper rulemaking processes when it abruptly terminated the grants after an internal review flagged DEI-aligned initiatives. 8 states, California, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Colorado, Illinois, Maryland, New York, and Wisconsin, challenged the move, saying it bypassed statutory procedures. A district judge temporarily blocked the cancellations, but the Supreme Court's intervention means the grants can remain frozen while litigation continues. This ruling is the latest of several involving President Trump's second-term policies to reach the Supreme Court, which now has a 6-3 conservative majority. The broader legal issue of whether courts can force the federal government to pay out canceled grants remains unresolved and likely to return to the court in future challenges. Watch this.
The Supreme Court has ruled in favor of the Trump administration, allowing a temporary suspension of $65 million in teacher training grants. In a close 5-4 decision, Justices Barrett, Gorsuch, Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh sided with the administration, while Chief Justice Roberts joined the court's 3 liberal justices in dissent. These grants were designed to place teachers in underserved communities and promote diversity in education. But in February, the Education Department abruptly revoked the funding, claiming the programs did not align with principles of merit, fairness, and excellence and could lead to waste and fraud. The backlash was swift. 8 states, including California and New York, sued, arguing that the cuts would leave schools scrambling to hire unqualified teachers and disrupt classrooms nationwide. A federal judge in Massachusetts stepped in, ordering the funds to remain available, calling it a necessary step to maintain stability in public education. The First Circuit Court upheld this ruling, rejecting the administration's arguments as speculative. But now, the Supreme Court has put that decision on hold. The justices ruled that the challengers failed to refute the government's claim that once the money is distributed, it would be impossible to recover. And, they noted, these programs have the financial means to stay afloat while the legal battle continues. For now, the grants are frozen, but the fight is far from over.
This is about restoring America to a meritocracy. Although it can't just be smooth sailing to get to that point. And what I say and what I mean when I say meritocracy means that everything given or everything rewarded is something that was earned, not something to placate people. So this is the Supreme Court ensuring that these grants and these funds are given to those who deserve it the most, irrespective of race, irrespective of sexual orientation, irrespective of other matters. Because if we start shifting the goalposts from being that, it's the people who deserve it the most, then it means that there's no need to work for it when you can just enter a certain category and have it be given to you. And that's where the issue is raised. Of course, in the past, you have to understand that in American history, meritocracy wasn't always the law of the land, especially to minorities and people who didn't fit in with the status quo, which is why tools like affirmative action and DEI procedures were put into place. Somewhat fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you might see it, is the fact that a lot of the affirmative action, for example, we know that affirmative action mostly targeted the white female demographic rather than the Black, Hispanic, Asian minorities that a lot of people assumed or hoped it would target. And the same also went for DEI as well, meaning that those minorities who took the brunt of the criticism for DEI and affirmative action were actually those who received it less. So now what this is aiming to do, what the Supreme Court is aiming to do in this ruling, is to ensure that at the end of the day, now it doesn't matter the skin color. It doesn't matter the sexual orientation. If you deserve it. In the 60s, you could have deserved a loan if you were a Black-owned business trying to apply for a loan at a bank and you didn't get it because of your skin color. Now, if you apply again and you deserve it, you will get it. That is what they're going for. So it's restoring equality while doing away with equity, which of course does remain controversial to some, but we will see how it goes under this administration. President Donald Trump has signed a series of executive orders aimed at reviving the U.S. coal industry, easing federal restrictions on mining and leasing, and directing coal energy toward powering artificial intelligence infrastructure. In a White House ceremony attended by coal miners, Trump called the initiative part of a broader strategy to support American energy independence and national security. The orders are designed to reopen coal leasing on public lands, halt scheduled closures of coal-fired plants, and task federal agencies, including the Department of Energy, with assessing coal's role in supporting energy-intensive AI data centers. The executive action also calls on the Environmental Protection Agency and Department of the Interior to streamline regulations that had limited coal production in recent years. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, who has led several deregulatory efforts, is coordinating the rollback of previous emissions restrictions affecting coal power plants. Coal currently provides approximately 16% of the nation's electricity, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, a significant decline from 45% in 2010. Trump's order seeks to reverse this trend by leveraging coal's role in meeting projected surges in electricity demand from AI data operations and manufacturing. This move comes amid warnings of rising energy needs due to AI growth, with forecasts anticipating a global 165% increase in electricity demands over the next 5 years. Let's take a look.
This directs all departments and agencies of the federal government to end all discriminatory policies against the coal industry. This ends the leasing moratorium that prevents new coal projects on federal land, and it's going to accelerate all permitting and funding for new coal projects to allow the coal industry to flourish under your leadership, sir.
That's great. Thank you. Okay.
It's good to see that the president is open to using different means to meet the energy demands that the country is surely going to be under. I mean, if you don't know, between crypto mining and AI, especially AI and its rise in everyday society, the energy demands of the United States has been rising steadily year after year after year after year. And with the current energy infrastructure, the United States isn't liable to be able to keep up. So it's good to see all of those shuttered coal mines or coal-fired processes being given new life. Of course, until a better way to produce energy is found, the ability to use the resource that we have in coal to match our energy demands has to be put into use. It would be foolish for the United States to handicap itself for handicapping's sake. So of course, coal wouldn't be the end-all be-all for the U.S.'s energy demands, but it's a good stopgap. It's a good gap measure until the U.S. can reach, its energy targets through, of course, things like hydroelectric power plants, through things like wind turbines, through things like nuclear energy. But until we get there, coal has been old faithful, as some may call it, trusted, reliable, and it also re-injects a spark into the coal industry, leading to more jobs, which can also help prop up the economy. So it's good on President Trump and the Department of Energy for finding a way to use coal, which has been so deprecated and spoken against recently, for a good purpose. So it's like combining the old school of coal with the new school of AI. We'll be right back with more news. Be sure to stay tuned.
The countdown to the Lord's soon return has begun, and in this first quarter of the year of completeness, Loveworld USA has indeed been spreading and preaching the gospel of our Lord Jesus, preparing the hearts of billions around the world to expect the Lord.
This year, we will complete the full preaching of the gospel in all nations.
Loveworld USA broadcasted life-changing programs with our man of God. Global Communion Service, Your Loveworld Specials, Global Day of Prayer, Healing Streams. Loveworld News, where we emphasize truth and deception. Truth Watch USA, where Americans are exposed to the truth. Topics such as the failed agenda of so-called globalists, what's really happening to your food, President Trump, a sign to the church. Prayer programs where effective prayers were offered. Tremendous Power, Pray for America, faith-filled programs like I'm Just Saying, Pastor Chris Worth reading, Stick to the Word, programs with Pastor Benny, and many more. We say thank you, dearest partners, for contributing towards our programming and daily operations through your partnership. Loveworld USA is positioned for a massive harvest of souls all around the world as we set our sail to reach more people in this second quarter, in more languages, and change more lives. This is a call to our dearest partners all over the world to join this mandate in completing the full preaching of the gospel to all nations as you sponsor our 2025 projects. 1. Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project. Ensure the spread of the message of the man of God through Loveworld USA. The spread of our ministry programs and agenda through satellite, cable, internet, digital, mobile apps, Alpha TV, OTT platforms, our news, and our current affairs. 2. Minutes to Reach Billions 4.0. Make your every minute count for the gospel as we spread the awareness of Loveworld USA to your world. 3. Translation of our language-specific channels. Make it possible for billions around the world to watch our programs in their native language. 4. Tag your name to a program. Sponsor and tag your name to our various Loveworld USA programs. You can adopt a specific program. 5. Studio upgrade. Join us today with your lavish gift to the work of Loveworld USA. Every SPs or dollar you give goes to accomplishing our mandate to fully preach the gospel with our life-transforming content. For more information, please call the number showing on your screen. God bless you.
Welcome back. U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has announced that he plans to instruct the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to end its long-standing recommendation that communities add fluoride to drinking water. The move comes as part of a broader reassessment of federal health policies related to public water systems. Speaking at a news conference in Salt Lake City alongside EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, Kennedy said he is assembling a task force of health experts to study the issue and develop new recommendations. While Kennedy cannot ban fluoridation at the local level, he can influence national guidelines and collaborate with the Environmental Protection Agency, which sets the legal maximum fluoride levels in public water systems. The EPA also confirmed Monday that it has launched a review of new scientific data concerning the potential health effects of fluoride exposure. The current federal limit for fluoride in drinking water is 4 milligrams per liter, though the CDC has recommended a level of 0.7 milligrams per liter since 2015. Kennedy praised Utah for becoming the first state to outlaw the fluoridation of public water, following a new state law signed in March by Republican Governor Spencer Cox. Water systems in the state must end fluoridation by May 7th. Nearly two-thirds of the U.S. population currently receives fluoridated water, but emerging studies, including ones from the National Toxicology Program, have raised concerns about potential risks at elevated exposure levels, prompting new federal scrutiny. Watch this.
Jr. is now moving forward with one of his top priorities as the Secretary of Health and Human Services, pushing to change CDC guidance to no longer recommend adding fluoride to public drinking water.
In the era of fluoridated toothpastes and mouthwashes, it makes no sense to have fluoride in our water.
On Monday, Utah becoming the first state in the country to ban fluoride from its drinking water systems, and more could soon follow suit. About two-thirds of the American public drink water with fluoride in it. It was added to drinking water in the 1900s to help prevent tooth decay.
And we have seen a 25% reduction in terms of tooth decay by putting fluoride in the water. And it is a low-cost opportunity to really eliminate health disparities for individuals who may not be able to get to the dentist.
But critics like RFK Jr. point to a report from the National Toxicology Program last year that found some evidence of lower IQ in children who had higher levels of fluoride exposure. But none of the children tested were in the U.S., and their exposure was twice the CDC's recommended limit for U.S. drinking water. The report also said more research is needed to see if those small doses recommended in the U.S. can cause harm, and that no cause and effect was found between fluoride exposure and lower IQ.
This is a win for millions of Americans around the country. And if you've listened again to your Loveworld specials with the man of God, Pastor Chris, you'll understand exactly where I'm coming from. Fluoride originally was used in things like rodenticide. Rodenticide meaning a rat poison, poison for rodents. That was one of its earliest original uses. And then, of course, there have been studies linking fluoride to cancers, to reductions in neurological function. I mean, there have even been studies linking fluoride, which is supposed to, help teeth and help different things, to spotting, like to having worse teeth that can cause staining and spotting and different issues at the dentist, which fluoride is actually supposed to help prevent, according to the sources. So it's good to see Robert F. Kennedy taking a stance against this. And then, of course, it's interesting to note how the CDC since 2015, so that's a decade ago, recommended the limit of fluoride be 0.7%. But to this day, it's been left at 0.7 milligrams per liter. But to this day, it's been left at 4 milligrams per liter, meaning that the country has been allowed to operate with 6 times the recommended level, or about 5.9 times the recommended level of fluoride in the water than what the CDC actually recommended, which makes you wonder, what could they possibly get out of it? I mean, at 4 milligrams per liter, that they couldn't get out of it at 0.7 milligrams per liter. But it's good to see that fluoride is slowly but surely being removed from the American water system. And in the coming years, it'll be important and interesting to note how much better the American public is doing in terms of health, and just in terms of overall quality of life due to fluoride being taken out of the water system. tensions between Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and Department of Government Efficiency Chief Elon Musk escalated on Tuesday after Musk responded to Schumer's accusations that DOGE is undermining Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Musk suggested on X that Schumer may be benefiting from government fraud, responding to the senator's earlier criticism of DOGE's budget cuts and restructuring efforts. Schumer had previously claimed in a Senate floor speech and on social media that DOGE's actions were tantamount to sabotaging essential federal programs. Make no mistake, what Elon Musk is doing at Social Security is cutting benefits, Schumer wrote. He cited concerns about office closures, web outages, and reduced access to services. Musk pushed back strongly, saying, "The intern running Schumer's social media account is lying." He denied any intent to reduce actual benefits and maintained that DOGE's reforms are focused on cutting waste, not services. DOGE, created earlier this year via executive order and led by Musk, is tasked with identifying and eliminating inefficient federal spending. The department has already canceled or cut funding from several federal programs, contracts, and DEI initiatives, claiming to have saved taxpayers $140 billion. The clash comes amid broader debates in Washington over government reform, entitlement program sustainability, and federal oversight, with DOGE drawing both praise for cost-cutting and criticism over service reductions. Again, this is a case where it's almost like the frog in the pot again. Americans have gotten used to, again, because it's American taxpayer money, Americans have gotten used to paying more in taxes to go into Social Security, and paying more and paying more and paying more. And again, it's the frog in the water. As the water is being raised, they don't mind that they're paying more because everything, they're regulating it. You pay more, well, I have to earn more. I have to get a second job. I have to figure out a side source of income. That's now become popular and commonly accepted in the American mind. Meanwhile, in the 1970s, you could go to school, and when I say school, I mean college, meaning a tertiary education institution on a minimum wage salary and also afford an apartment at the same time on a minimum wage salary, not even working 40 hours a week, working 30 hours a week because you're a student. But as that changed and that promise of that American dream went away, it went away gradually. So the water in the pot, the temperature was raised gradually. And now Americans are comfortable because now the balloon has been inflated. The water is hot, but they've regulated it, then now they can't get out. So even when there's waste and there's fraud that's being reported at the Social Security Administration, where their money can be saved because they've been fed the lie that this is needed, this is how it's always been, so this is how it has to be, they can be skeptic, they can be critical of it. And that leads to senators like Chuck Schumer having the boldness to say that the Social Security Administration, which has notoriously been inefficient, there's millions of claims filed against them yearly because people haven't received their checks on time or they've had their benefits denied, all of a sudden it's going to get worse or is going to lose funding. While all in essence, it's just reducing the amount of money that it needs to run efficiently. So whether that's downsizing buildings or from having 5 buildings when all the work can honestly be done in 3, you save the money on those 2 buildings and you consolidate the workforce into 3 buildings. Whether that's being able to consolidate departments from having 10 departments into 6, you save money, which is taxpayer money. And now that money can actually go into the Social Security benefits instead of going into the hands of the people, who of course we don't want people to be laid off, but if your job is redundant, the money is still coming out of the American taxpayers' pockets. So it's good on DOGE for doing what they're supposed to do, finding any way to release money back into the hands of the American people, while also at the same time not jeopardizing the United States government infrastructure. And now, let's take a look at the weather update. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. Iran and U.S. hold first nuclear negotiation since President Trump's return. President Trump exempts electronics from tariffs amid global negotiation push. Doge report blames Democrat-run states for majority of $400 million in unemployment fraud. Judge rules Colombia protest leader Mahmoud Khalil can be deported. And that's News Plus for today. Remember to join us same time tomorrow for more. I'm TGK Andre. Good night, and God bless you.